Lots of updates today, and I will then take your questions. Let's start with the latest figures. To date, over 1,200 victims of the 10/7 massacre have been identified, and 10,718 have been injured since the beginning of this war. Hamas has fired over 12,500 rockets at Israeli communities, with over 2,000 misfiring, the large majority of which fall inside Gaza and cause extensive damage and casualties. The IDF has notified the families of the deaths of 459 soldiers. Our thoughts are with these families and the entire nation of Israel at this impossible time of grief. Hamas is still holding 129 people hostage since 10/7. Among the remaining 129 hostages in the Hamas terror dungeons are 110 males and 19 females. There are 2 children under the age of 18, the Bibas children, and 10 over 75. 118 of the hostages are Israelis, another 11 are foreign nationals. Meanwhile, hostages who return to Israel continue to share their horrendous accounts of their captivity in Gaza. Last night, CBS's 60 Minutes aired an interview with one of the hostages who was released, 36-year-old Yarden Roman Gat. Yarden described being stripped of her clothing and being paraded around as a trophy while crowds celebrated. Yarden says she was, quote, not a person, end quote. Yesterday, the IDF revealed yet again how twisted and dangerous Hamas's army of terror is, with the exposure of one of the largest terrorist tunnels in Gaza. It spans well over 4 kilometers, that's 2.5 miles. Its entrance is located only 400 meters, less than 1,400 feet from the Erez crossing, used by Gazans on a daily basis to enter Israel for work and medical treatment in Israeli hospitals. Now, this tunnel, built 50 meters underground, is wide enough for a truck to drive through it. And in fact, it was a project led by Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, the butcher of Khan Yunis. I urge you to take a look at this video that was posted by the IDF showing that tunnel. The IDF continues to discover and target Hamas assets among civilian areas in Khan Yunis, Jabalia, and Shajaiya. In a home belonging to a senior Hamas commander in Jabalia, our soldiers seized over 5 million shekels worth of cash. That's the equivalent of close to $100.5 million US dollars. This is the same Jabalia where the Nahal Brigade located an operational tunnel shaft leading directly into a child's bedroom. Regarding the upcoming UN Security Council vote, the UN Security Council that will convene today to discuss a resolution calling for a ceasefire, the same UN Security Council that to this day has not condemned Hamas. A ceasefire that leaves Hamas in power with impunity and with the desire and capability to repeat October 7th again and again and again is simply unacceptable. We are thankful to our friends around the world who get it. Now, the proposed UN Security Council resolution on the table also calls for humanitarian aid access to Gaza. In case you haven't noticed, humanitarian aid is entering Gaza. Yesterday, 201 humanitarian aid trucks were inspected and transferred to the Gaza Strip. 122 trucks were inspected at Nitzana crossing and transferred to Gaza via the Rafah crossing. That's the border with Egypt. 79 were inspected and transferred to Gaza via Kerem Shalom, as per our agreement with the United States. Kerem Shalom, a border crossing between Israel and Gaza that was damaged on October 7th, is now operational. Let me underscore a few important points here. Israel has access capacity to inspect more trucks than the ones entering the Gaza Strip. It's international aid organizations and UN agencies who should keep up with the pace. Israel has placed no restrictions on the entry of food and water into Gaza. Plus, on multiple occasions, we have seen and published proof of Hamas stealing these essential resources from its own population. The deafening silence of aid groups and international organizations about this is not only ridiculous, but it's also counterproductive. We are being asked about a claim that Israel allegedly targeted a Catholic church, the Holy Family Parish in the Gaza Strip. According to an IDF investigation, this claim is not true. If you look at the map, the church is located in the Rimal neighborhood of Gaza City, where on Saturday, in that specific area, there was no fighting. The IDF takes claims regarding harm to sensitive sites with the utmost seriousness, especially churches, considering that Christian communities are a minority group in the Middle East. Representatives of the church contacted the IDF regarding explosions that were heard near the church. And during the dialogue between the IDF and representatives of the Christian community in Gaza City, no reports of a hit on a church nor civilians being injured or killed were raised. The IDF only targets terrorist and terror infrastructure and does not target civilians, no matter their religion. And our forces take vast, unprecedented measures to avoid harm to uninvolved civilians while fighting against a terrorist organization, which does everything to purposely put civilians at risk. On Saturday, there was indeed fighting in the vicinity of a different church, the Latin church in the Shajaiya area. Shajaiya is one of the most aggressive battle zones in this war. Our forces responded to fire by Hamas terrorists. Note that the civilian population in that area was requested to evacuate many weeks ago. It is important to remember here that throughout the war, and specifically this week, the IDF has proven once again that it is loyal to truth and transparency, even when it is the most inconvenient, awful thing to us to acknowledge, as you saw in the incident of the 3 Israeli hostages who managed to escape their captors and were shot at mistakenly by our forces. This is a war. All wars are tragic, even the most justified ones. Israel didn't want this war. Israel didn't start this war, but we will finish this war when Hamas is eliminated. I will now take your questions.
The first question is from Gwen Ackerman from Bloomberg. Is there a comment, please, on Iran's claim that Israel and the US are behind the cyber attack on its gas stations?
No, we have nothing to say about Iran's claims. What we do have to say today, though, is that Iran has been involved in a cyber attack against an Israeli hospital in Israel's north in the city of Tzafat. That's the Ziv hospital.
Melanie Lidman from AP. Can you talk a little bit about why the aerial bombardment of Gaza has been so intense? 22,000 targets, according to the last IDF release. Can you explain a bit about why such intense levels of aerial bombardment is needed?
Well, we have defined 2 goals for this war. A war, again, as I stated, we didn't start and we didn't want. And as you know, we said that Hamas terrorist regime must be eliminated, their military wing, their governance body in Gaza. After this war, once we are done, Hamas will be no longer in control of this territory. And we also said that we want to bring back all hostages home. And of course, after that, to secure that they will not see a resurgence of terrorism from that territory. Now, it is a question, I guess, that you're asking about proportionality. And proportionality, according to international law and according to common sense, is doing what it takes to achieve a legitimate military goal. Our goal is legitimate. It is very legitimate. It is the just cause. So we are doing whatever it takes in the best operational way that the IDF has decided upon to eliminate the Hamas terrorist regime. And of course, while we're doing it, we are also doing our utmost efforts to keep the civilian population in the Gaza Strip out of harm's way. We want to minimize the civilian suffering and civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip, while Hamas, they purposely want to put civilians in danger. They want to increase the civilian suffering. They want to increase the civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip. In fact, in interviews of Hamas leaders, they say that they want to sacrifice the Palestinian population of Gaza to achieve their sick goal of obliterating the only Jewish state in the world. So we will not let them achieve any of these goals. Nathan?
Lior Soroka, Washington Post. Human Rights Watch claimed today that the Israeli government is using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare in the Gaza Strip. Can you relate to that?
Well, this is a very unfortunate language. This is absolutely not true, because if you listen carefully to the daily briefing that I just gave you, then you'd see that many trucks, in fact, yesterday 201 trucks with humanitarian aid entered the Gaza Strip, and we said that we have even greater ability to inspect more and more trucks than the UN agencies and humanitarian aid organizations can actually deliver. So we placed zero restrictions on the amount of food and water that are being able to enter the Gaza Strip. So this is a ridiculous claim. And in fact, Hamas terrorists are the ones stealing these important resources from the Palestinian population in Gaza.
From Sky News, does Israel deny the claims its sniper shot 2 civilians in the Catholic Church in Gaza?
I just answered that question during the briefing. I told you that there was no fighting in the Rimal neighborhood on Saturday where this specific Catholic church is located. The IDF has conducted an investigation, and so there was no fighting around that area. The IDF representatives also talked to representatives of the Christian community over there. And as I stated, it was not something that was brought up in the conversation. So we are indeed investigating. We looked into it. And again, I said it that even when the truth is the most inconvenient thing to us to acknowledge, we say it. We admit it. We acknowledge it, as was the case with the 3 Israeli hostages who were mistakenly shot at by our forces. This is not just such a case. We've had numerous incidents throughout this war, where day 73 now, in which Israel was accused of things. It was reported, and then eventually, as you know, media channels, reports had to backtrack their statements. So after more and more was transpired. So, Nathan?
Is from JNS and David Isaac. U.S. Defense Secretary Austin is reportedly going to ask Israel to end its large-scale ground campaign in favor of more targeted strikes. Jake Sullivan told press on Friday that Israel is entering a new phase of the war with more precise targeting. Yet we haven't heard a statement to this effect from Israeli officials. Can you clarify what Israel's plan is? Is Israel moving to a new, more targeted phase? And is it doing so at the behest of the United States?
Well, first, I haven't seen such a report about Lloyd Austin's visit. We will have to wait and see what comes out in the discussions and statements. You see, there's no daylight between us and our best friends in Washington in what pertains to the goals of this war, which is to eliminate the Hamas terrorist regime, to bring back all hostages home, and of course, to avoid as much civilian suffering and civilian casualties to the extent possible. And the IDF is doing unprecedented steps in modern urban warfare in that respect. Now, regarding the next phase of the war and such questions, well, this is for the Israeli leadership and the IDF to decide. Israel, of course, is a sovereign nation. We will do whatever it takes to achieve the goals that I just stated. There's no stopwatch here. Israel is fighting what the Prime Minister has referred to as Israel's second war of independence. It's a war on our survival. Hamas is a genocidal existential threat on our borders. And our nation decided that we will no longer live next to this terrorist enclave. Full stop. Okay. No more questions?
Williams from Zenger International. Tal, is the aid entering Gaza still taking too long because the UN organizations are too slow in giving out the aid?
Well, yes, Jim. As I said, we have access ability to inspect these trucks, and 2001 trucks entered yesterday. We can check more. We have the Kerem Shalom crossing, which is a crossing between Israel and Gaza, operational now again as per the agreements with our friends in Washington. So aid is not only entering from the Rafah border crossing, but also from the Kerem Shalom one for now. And international aid organizations should keep up with the pace of our inspections. Indeed.
Time for today from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Can you describe the national mood in the wake of the devastating event with the 3 hostages? How do people in Israel feel?
Oh, that is a very, very tragic event. There's a heavily charged atmosphere here, I can tell you, definitely. We're all embracing, hugging these 3 families. That should not have happened. We're drawing the very important lessons as we go, because such an incident can never, ever reoccur again. And our forces should have brought up this idea that some of the hostages may be able to somehow flee their captors. It should have been a scenario that we should have been better prepared to. And if you heard the IDF chief of staff yesterday, he went down south, he talked to soldiers, and he stated again that this should have never happened because the 3 hostages, so it seemed, they really thought it through. They didn't want to appear as a threat to our forces, and they did almost everything possible not to appear as such, and yet they were mistakenly identified as such. But you see Shaja'iyah, it's such a terrible scene right now. It's full with terrorists and terrorist supporters. And at this point, the entire civilian population there should have evacuated many, many weeks ago. So the only ones there on the ground are either terrorist supporters, or IDF forces. But we should have been better prepared to it. Now, there have been ambushes there. There have been traps and whatnot. And there was an incident there right before, with an encounter with terrorists right before that tragic incident and right after. And just a few days ago, we lost 9 of our soldiers there, our best sons. So it's a very, very complicated scenery. And as you know, our enemy is brutal. They wear civilian clothing. They try to lure in our forces, sometimes by playing sound in Hebrew, voices in Hebrew, sometimes even of children, to try to lure them into their ambushes. So it's a very, very difficult moment for our nation. Okay, that concludes the daily briefing for today. Thank you for joining us.